Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here and speak to you about science and faith. So I'll tell you a bit myself. I'm a professor of theoretical physics. I've been here since 2006. Probably around the time when you were born. And I really enjoy physics. I'll tell you a little bit about a piece of physics that I was just thinking about recently. Again, but it's something that really struck me in my undergraduate days. So this is one of my great heroes called Ard. And sorry, just a bit. So I'm going to have to turn away from you because I can't do it on my laptop. So I'm going to turn this way and point. I was told by speakers never look at the slide, but I think I'm very happy to do it. So, what Ard was about was something really cool. In 1905, Albert Einstein took special relativity, which is one of the first courses you'll learn in our physics. It's a theory of very false things, and it's E is mc squared. You see that right here? E is mc squared, the square root of mc squared squared is mc squared, plus the second term, which is the P, which is the momentum term, so things move. Right? So basically, it's E is mc squared. So energy and mass can be interconverted between them. They're somehow two sides of the same coin. It's a really beautiful set of ideas, and they're all done in his great year of 1905, and he did 3 Nobel Prize winning worthy papers. Einstein never got Nobel Prize for special relativity, we know what. So that was the one. In 1926, Erwin Schrödinger came up with the Schrödinger equation, or right here, a version of, which is a theory of very small things. Who's heard of the Schrödinger equation? So it's one of the greatest cultural artifacts of humankind. It describes a theory of very small things that is really accurate. It can explain the principle of chemistry, of material science, a wide range of things that we see in our world describe that equation. It's a theory of very small things. So Paul did from Cambridge had a very obvious question. What are the very small things, which are described by Erwin Schrödinger's equation, that make them move very fast, according to the laws of special relativity? Seems like a simple question. So he tried for the electron. The electron has spin up and spin down, so it has 2 components. It's a slight complication. Otherwise, it should be straightforward. He tried and tried and tried and tried. And the only way he can make it work was by going this way to do it. It's a slightly abstract form, but it includes this 4 vector, which has 2 components to it, not just 1 component. So 2 particles rather than 1. Ard was a great mathematical physicist, so he just said, well, that's what math says, and published it. And later he said, well, perhaps that extra component in my equation is in fact a particle of some kind or the other. It's kind of crazy to think. Interestingly, in 1932, Carl Anderson of Caltech discovered this particle. It's called the positron. Positrons are like electrons, except they've got the opposite charge, and they're antimatter. So if an electron and a positron come together, all of the mass in those two becomes E, because of energy. That's where the E is mc squared thing is connected. But it's a very kind of amazing property of the world. We have antimatter discovered not by looking for it in nature, but by pure mathematical reason. So it turns out every particle that we're used to, electrons, neutrons, protons, has an antimatter. And when an matter and antimatter come together, all that energy turns into E. It's actually enormously strong. I took a grain of salt of antimatter, dropped it here into this room, and we blew up all of us. At least not well. I don't know how to get serious. Very cool piece of science. Later, Eugene Wigner and other guys, when they wrote about this and other similar discoveries in physics, in the famous essay called The Unreasonable Practices of Mathematics, which is a gift, he says, we should now understand and preserve. So now that we graduated from year 8, I was taking up the Boston Ultra-Tennis class in Utrecht, where I was studying, and I worked through this proof this derivation by Ard. I thought that can't possibly be true. How could it be true that 2 very disparate pieces of physics, when they bring together, make a prediction so wild that you wouldn't imagine that your wildest dream? There's a whole other set of particles, like our particles, except they're antimatter. It's kind of crazy. Why would that be true? Why would that be true, first of all? And why would we be able to discover that purely on mathematical grounds? And so I was sure that there was some wiggle room somewhere, and you could figure out some way of having the Schrödinger equation be Lorentz invariant without having to add in this extra particle. spent the whole night trying to figure this out. And by the morning, I realized, of course, that there was no way around it. Really beautiful. I actually walked down the canals of Utrecht, I remember this, and wanted to grab somebody and say, did you know that quantum mechanics and special relativity together gives you antimatter? Or being unshaven and unwashed probably would not have been a good idea to grab someone person who's trying to get their morning coffee or go to work. But it was just completely amazing to me. I wrote an article about this recently on the beauty of these things, but also the sublime. So the sublime is an idea of things that are not just beautiful, but it's almost terrifying. So it's the kind of feeling you might have when you stand at the sea in an enormous hurricane that you're looking at, power overwhelms you. When you come to a great mountain ledge and you look down and you see this enormous valley below you, you feel this sense of beauty and a sense of fear. And I remember that feeling, and I felt like I touched something bigger than myself. And I thought, I can't believe that I was allowed to see this thing. It's so beautiful and so beautiful. That's really cool. So, if anything you come away with, remember this: one of the greatest cultural artifacts of our time is actually the drop equation, which I just showed you right there. And it's beautiful. It's as beautiful as the most amazing Michelangelo painting. It's the most beautiful. It's the most beautiful piece of Bach music. It's a completely unimaginably beautiful piece of science. It describes something of our natural world. And now I'm starting to actually pinch myself sometimes that I get paid money to think about these kinds of cool things. I kind of move from this quantum stuff to more biological things. So these days I work on my work is on more complex systems, and I started working in biology and evolution. And recently I think it's the biggest discovery I've made in my career. It's a mathematical argument about how evolution searches in the space of algorithms, and that helped me explain something about the symmetry that you see in proteins around the world. This got a lot of attention, and the New York Times in fact wrote a slightly exaggerated headline: "Life experiments for symmetry is like a new law of nature." I'm not sure it's saying that I discovered a new law of nature, but it was pretty cool. I had that same kind of thinking and feeling when I first realized how this works. And I thought, that's amazing that I'm able to touch something about the way the world works. It's absolutely incredible. I can't believe that I get paid money to do this. When I was finished my undergraduate degree in Utrecht, my grandfather retired from a job in a factory. And I remember him saying, finally I can do what I really want to do. I'm retired, I can be free. And I understood why he did that. But in Utrecht, I had professors in their 80s who still came in every day to do physics. They weren't being paid for it, they just loved it so much. And I thought, I would like to have a career where when I'm 80, I still want to come in every day because I love what I'm doing. And so I think science is really cool. If you have a chance to learn science, it's amazing. And I think it's the greatest, I think science is the greatest thing human beings have ever created, the greatest set of ability to reach truth. And so that kind of raises big questions. Scientific progress is amazing. Here's a picture of punch cards that think about 5 megabytes of data. Right now, that's just one of many, by the side of a photograph from your phone. You see how fast technology moves. And so it's very tempting when you look at this kind of amazing, unbelievable advances of science to think, wouldn't it be great if the same power could be used to answer really big questions like, what does it mean to be human? Or what is a good life? Or what is right? Or what is wrong? Or what's the purpose of life? All this kind of question. And it's natural if you see the power of science and its amazing ability to change our lives, how much technology has changed even in your lifetimes. It's easy to look at that and think, wouldn't it be great if those methods could eventually answer our questions? I think that idea is floating around in our culture very widely in various kinds of forms. And I think a lot of people believe somehow that's what science is telling me. My grandfather told me about, my grandparents are very staunch humanists, and part of their atheistic worldview, which has a kind of Christian view of human being tagged onto it. And one of the reasons why they're humanists is because they felt science had disproven Christianity. Science was making all this progress even in their lifetimes. So, is this true? Well, I want to talk about this question about whether science and faith are at odds with each other. Right? Here you've got science, which is rational, which is progress, use faith, which sounds constant, backwards and strange. And surely we want to be on the side of science, not on the side of faith. It's natural. What I'm going to argue is that this juxtaposition, this kind of contrast between science and faith, is a kind of zombie myth. So I call it a zombie myth because zombies are a little bit like the movie you chop off the head and they rise again. You can't really kill them. So these are kind of these myths. The first part of the assumption is that science is the best out to be true about ultimate questions. They're questions just teeing up for you. I think science is a great and wonderful thing. I cannot answer all people. So here are the quotes. Peter Medawar was a Nobel Prize winner in Oxford. Starts this quote actually by saying science is the greatest endeavor that humans have ever engaged in. But to ask it, to answer all the questions, is a little bit like asking your own fellow familiar with a fly, or anything else that's not really made for it. That's the reason even in science is being very likely, Medawar said, by the existence of questions that science cannot answer. That doesn't equal to all society with problems. These are the questions that children ask. The ultimate question is called awkward, that famous question. I've been asked questions as, how did everything begin? What are we all here for? What is the point of living? It is not the science, therefore, but metaphysics, magic, literature, or religion who is turned for answers to questions like the first and last states. Now, Medawar was an atheist, but he still made his argument in his book, The Business of Science. He wrote about it before he died. So, what? Well, I could stop here and just finish the title of my question on science and religion. To read Medawar says they're not. Religion is the source of answers to the ultimate questions. It'll be slightly boring, so I'm going to give you one example, just to help you think through how this might work. Let's say I want to ask a really important ultimate question. That's the one, what's the value of a human being? This question of the value of human beings underlies a lot of our political discourse, our legal structures. The principle that the value of human beings is super important. And one way this is codified nowadays is in language of human rights, humans have certain inalienable rights. And I hope everyone in the room agrees that that's something that is true, that humans have these rights. And these rights don't depend on whether you are rich or poor, black or white, old or young, smart or maybe not so smart. It's that sometimes intrinsic to you, it's independent of your characteristics. How do we deal with science? Well, we be facetious here. Let's say that you were a chemist. Would I measure the value of the elements in your water? Right? Well, clearly something with gold is not gold. You're a physiologist, you can measure the size of your brain. Psychologist, sort of you are. An anthropologist, how community values you, or economist, and the value you produce. Because I worry that we are analyzed that way by our political overlords. But the fact is, the minute I try to use one of these metrics to measure what value are, I immediately, not only does it seem silly, but also distinguishing because people are different from using whatever metric you think of which measure. It holds up the very principle of unalienable human rights. So where do these things come from? Well, as a Christian, I believe that human beings have intrinsic human rights independently of their characteristics, because they are made and loved by God. And that's, I think, a very deep and profound justification. If you're a humanist like my grandparents were, you would just say, this is just a brute fact about the world. And there's a value, and there's no need to argue about it. It's just true. There's no need to, it doesn't need justification. There may be other ways you might justify this argument, but science, and those who do non-science question. In fact, I'll even further say, if you try to use science to answer this question, you'll erode your way. It's not only that science can't answer it, it's dangerous for our physical and moral, legal, and frameworks to try to use science to answer these kinds of questions. This is a very important question, right? It's a super important question. And science and no zero all science can answer it. Alright, that's number one. So the simple point is that we're all philosophers and theologians. You all have some theory of the value of human beings because you need that every day in decisions that you make. And the question really is, are you a good one or not? Where do the ideas come from? The fact is that those kind of questions are important questions. Now, science can help you illuminate those questions. Science can give you facts that you can use to make arguments on those questions. But science itself, and the pursuit of science, are ever value. There's very little to say about those questions. I don't know complicated gives things a sense about that. Okay. So there's lots of complicated questions in the world. And there's lots of simple or wrong answers. And there are complex or right point of this person is to say that somehow many people vote on the simple or wrong, and many votes are right. That's true or not, I don't know. The point is, the question is ultimately not, what's the value of a human being, or what is right and what is wrong, or what should be the purpose of my life. These are difficult questions, and complex answers. When somebody gives you a simple answer to them, then you're almost certainly going to figure it out. The kind of zombie myth that's passed around is that somehow scientists don't believe in God. The feeling is that scientists are something like vegetarian butchers, right? So people who don't really believe, Christian scientists are vegetarian butchers. So I'm a Christian scientist. People sometimes say to me, how can you be a Christian and a scientist? A bit like I was a vegetarian selling meat. I'm peddling something I don't really believe in. Well, again, I think, interestingly, here in Oxford, with some friends, I ran a course called Developing Christian Mind, which had a weekend last week, helps maybe graduate students helping think about how the Christian faith and subjects align across all subjects that we can think of. Scientists are the easiest set of academics to find with lots of scientists who are Christians. A few years ago, actually, interestingly, the entire first year physics curriculum, all the main lectures were taught by people who were Christians, which is by chance that they happen to all be like that. But there are lots of Christians in physics, for example, and it's much easier to find Christians in physics or open than there are in humanities and social sciences. So, relatively speaking, there are a lot of Christians in the sciences. You can see how that is. What I really did in depth with my friends who made our recommendation, look, take care of the science of scientists on global origin, and you'll see that scientists have lots of religious beliefs, and how religious they are is often affected very much by the country they're in. So they're more likely to be religious in countries like India, and less likely to be religious in countries like France. The next thing is zombie myth that I want to talk about is this idea of a conflict myth between science and religion. The idea that somehow science and brave scientists fought their way up against the superstitious, powerful religious elites and eventually freed themselves to be able to think independent thoughts. And that's the story of the philosophy of science throughout the Middle Ages. And again, I'm just going to, it's a long, interesting, and more complicated story, exactly how science and religion interacted. But the first order, this Peter Harrison, who used to be in Oxford from Queensland, he says, those who argue that the confidence of science and religion will follow the confidence, the myth of perennial conflict in science and religion is not no history of science is described. And here's some examples. Actually, historians mainly, who wrote a book called Galileo's Legitimate Myths about Science and Religion, where they looked at these various myths. Galileo, of course, is a famous kind of martyr for science, as it's often told in the public. The real story is more complicated, so the historians all have to say. But Alan Chapman, who is here at Water College, a historian of astronomer, has a very lovely book of explaining why the historian myths in the history of science and faith. It's predominantly a reaction to this public idea that science and faith have been historically complement each other, and Alan is trying to show that the wrong way of thinking about the interaction of science and faith. So, in fact, science has incredibly deep Christian roots. Its methods are based on theological considerations that the uniformity of the world is God in the world can expect. Like you experiment here in Oxford, that if I do in Cambridge, I'm smart, I should get the same results in the same conditions. That's not obvious to most people in this field. The idea that might be true, which is a very important assumption in science, comes from Christian theological roots. The next kind of big one I look at is leading dogs and leading a big unicorn or a flying people. I have this because the quote was from the very quotable Richard Dawkins. This is called the asymmetry argument. So the asymmetry argument is a bit like this. If you want to believe in teapots, unicorns, and tooth fairies, Thor or Yahweh, the onus is on you to say why you believe this. The onus is not on the rest of us to say why we do not. We, who are atheists, also atheists, atheists, and unicornists, we don't have to bother saying so. So the asymmetry argument is the idea that if I want to argue for belief in God, I need to give you some evidence, because the default is that there is no God. That's the asymmetry. That's kind of evidentialist argument in certain ways. The argument is that's the asymmetry argument. Very common. I encounter it almost every time I go to talk to this age. I'm going to argue to you that this is a naive way of thinking about the world, and it's almost certainly wrong. Let me give you an example of why I think this symmetry argument is wrong. And the first order of the symmetry argument is wrong, and then I'll explain to you why it's wrong. So the example is this one. Why do we have laws of nature? Right? So why is there a universe at all? Right? Why do the universe have laws? That's the kind of question you think about. Well, that's a very interesting question. Where do they come from? Well, there's the first order of three options. The first option is that these laws of nature have always existed, so they're somehow eternal. That may be true, but it's not a scientific claim. It's some kind of metaphysical claim about the nature of reality, which is false. If they've always existed and they had then they weren't caused by anything, things are very plausible or strange. Another option would be if they pulled into being out of ontological nothingness. So there was real nothingness, okay? And that by that I mean not like quantum vacuum or something, but no laws of logic, no laws of mathematics, nothing, and the laws of nature come into being. That's another option that you might have. The third option might be that the whole space and time is dependent on some non-spatial temporal reality, what we might call necessary being, which theists typically call something like God, something that's outside of space and time. It's also all on scientific grounds. That points to the first order, whether you believe in God or don't believe in God, you've got those three options if you want to think about what laws of nature. All three of them are metaphysical options. And the question really is which of these is right or wrong. It's not an argument about evidence or not. And where somebody like Dawkins getting this wrong is he's talking about God as if God is a flying teapot. It's actually according to Russell, or Dawkins as the example of being unicorn. And this makes a very fundamental error about what God is. God is not an object out there, a bit like a teapot, which you can observe. Which you, if that were the case, you're actually justified to be skeptical about it. I come to you and tell you I've discovered this new virus in my lab. It's really amazing, incredible. You can be skeptical until you give really good evidence that that is true. But God is outside of space and time. God is not a human being like ourselves or a big and smart. God is the reason why the universe is here. We think that God is the cause, the ultimate cause of the universe in the first place. And once you realize that's what God is like, then these evidence arguments don't make any sense. It's the wrong way of thinking about it. So that asymmetry argument is just incorrect. If you want to think about these three, then you can ask you the question, of these three options, give any hope at all of adjudicating which of these might be right and which might be wrong. So here's one of my other great heroes, John Cookie, who was a student of Hilary Rocks, actually. And famous physicist who then moved into theology and wrote a lot of interesting books, passed away recently. He said, if we were to understand the nature of gravity, we have only two possible starting points. The group fact of the visible world, so we have options 1 and 2, or the group fact of the divine will and purpose behind that visible world. So what is Cookie trying to say? What he's trying to say is, if I want to assess the evidence for the being of God or no God, which is the argument, the kind of issue that Dawkins is trying to get at in that asymmetry argument thing. You have to start with one option and look at the world and ask yourself, does that make sense in the world? Or the other option. So one option is there is a God, and we look at the world and see if there's anything that makes sense, that makes more sense in the world, given that starting point. Or I can take the other option and say there is no God, we look at the world and ask myself, does it make more sense? Given there is no God. Does that make sense? That's kind of very basic argument. You can formalize like this thing invasion, language, the probability of theism given evidence is very hard to assess. The probability of atheism given evidence is very hard to assess. But you can assess something else, which is the probability of theism on its own, which we don't know, right? But this probability of some evidence given theism, and the probability of more evidence given atheism. So the ratio of these two is one thing you can assess. So we have a base factor. If the base factor is large, in this case, then the evidence is in favor of theism. If the base factor is small, so this is a slightly formal way of saying we start from the assumption there is a God, or start from the assumption there isn't a God. I don't know a priori what those probabilities are, but I can ask myself if the evidence is increased or decreases the probability. Well, that's interesting if I look at science. What I actually find is something perhaps more surprising. So the uniformity of nature has explained to you the intelligibility of nature, the idea that I can look at nature and extract understanding of it, like what Dirac did when he extracted understanding of antimatter from the mathematical structure of the world. This is not surprising on theism, or not so surprising on theism. If there's a God behind the world, intelligent behind the world, we might expect to have it be intelligible. It is surprising on atheism. Why would the world be intelligible? Why would the world be uniform? Those are unusual properties for our universe. It's not all obvious why they would be true. If I believe in moral realism, I believe that the fact that human beings have value independent of who they are is true, whether you believe it or not. When you do that, or Western governments often behave that way, okay, I think it's actually true. But actually, it's much easier to support some kind of moral realism than if you don't. You can have good atheistic arguments for moral realism as well. So on balance, the base factor is positive. But look at the beauty of the world, the beauty of science, the amazing beauty of nature, the beauty of things that people use. That's also something that perhaps this is another argument becomes a bit more complex. But I still think that the fact of beauty increases is more likely on theism than atheism. So again, it increases the probability of theism. And the fact that we are free, if you believe that we are free, autonomous moral creatures, if you believe that's true, that's quite likely on theism, but it would be very surprising. There are, of course, other arguments that the Christian the other way around. The fact of suffering, the evil in the world, which is very different than the theists explain, is something that pushes you more towards the idea that perhaps this world is something that doesn't care about us. Perhaps it is going to be blind to this. That would be something very hard. My point is really, if you were to argue for against God, science itself is probably not the right way to start. Although I think it's facts about science, facts about the natural world, on balance, more towards theism. Right. So I want to finish with the fact that we're all false theologians, and so I've given you some. I've been asked to think about science and faith. I haven't really talked about science very much. I've been talking about what science is. It's more like a philosophical, theological sort of idea. That's what it's really about. And the first order, the question of are science and faith friends or foes? The answer is the first order probably friends. It's a relatively simple thing to answer. The more complicated questions about what it means to be a human being or how you should live your life are simply always going to have more complex answers. If somebody gives you simple answers, like science and faith, science constitutes faith, for example, like zombies walking off in the wrong direction, I can tell you for sure that's wrong. A very complicated question is Christianity true? If this is a super important question. It has dramatic implications for the questions of who you are, where you're going to end up, etc. It's a very important question for you in your life. That is also a difficult question. I'd say significantly more difficult than special relativity quantum mechanics. But also a very important question. And our hope is that the rest of these big questions will answer these more difficult questions. And I'm very happy that I was asked to answer the simplest one. With that, I want to thank you very much for your attention.